Welcome, everyone, to another episode of IT Visionaries. And today we have a special guest. Listen, you know, if you've listened to the show, I have an affinity for people making actual products, physical products. We have one of those here today. Neil Day is the CTO of R-Zero. Neil, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So we've read up on R-Zero. It's very fascinating, but for our audience members that may not know, tell us, what is R-Zero and what do you guys do?
Yeah, R-Zero is a biosafety company. We build disinfection systems that eliminate pathogens from public spaces. So our first product was called ARC, and it's a very powerful UVC lamp that can sterilize 1,000 square feet in about 7 minutes. And it's effective against coronavirus, all kinds of viruses, bacteria, mold, et cetera. And we built it to help people get back to the places that they love gathering, work, school, places like that.
Okay, so this is a very timely product given the current environment of where we live. But for those of you listening and aren't able to picture or imagine what this lamp, the ARC product by R-Zero looks like, I'm going to describe it my best way. Imagine a tower with 4 pillars. It's narrow, so it's like you could possibly grip it if you had big hands, right? It's a tower. It looks like it's about waist high. I'm sure you can make them bigger. And it's got pillars of light. And these lights or lamps are the UV lamps. It's on rolling wheels, so it's similar to like an office chair. You can roll it to wherever you need it to be. And Neil, you just said when the light is on, up to 1,000 square feet, it's going to disinfect and kill harmful germs, bacteria, viruses, and things of that nature. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other key things we built in was IoT technology. So not only does it do its job killing pathogens, but it collects data about when, where, and how long it was run. And that allows us to give people confidence that it's actually been used properly in spaces. So the hardware component was a big piece, but also the software for providing transparency and auditability was another big aspect of the project too.
Yeah, let's dive into how you and the team developed this product or have worked on this product, because a lot of times when there's a physical product like this, it takes years and years of development. Obviously, we are currently in an interesting time period of the pandemic where pathogens are of principal concern. When did this project start? When did it begin where teams were starting to say like, hey, listen, we want to develop this tool? Give me an idea of like the founding of this story, because it didn't start a year ago, at least. I don't think it did, but
it started a year and a half ago, actually.
A year and a half. Was it brought on by coronavirus?
Yeah. So Ben, Grant, and Eli, the 3 founders, got together at the beginning of April last year, realizing that coronavirus was going to completely change the landscape in some meaningful ways, and started thinking ahead to when people wanted to return to work and sort of gather in the ways that we're all accustomed to, and thought about how we could hasten that and enable it through technology. I got involved a couple of weeks after the founding of R-Zero and joined as an advisor as they were starting to think through particularly the software and back-end infrastructure to kind of bring this to life, and was just excited by the vision, the team, and decided to join full-time over that summer, and have really been full-time since July of last year. And, the initial product concept came together pretty quickly in that April timeframe, and we had prototypes up and running by late June, early July, and we're in initial manufacturing in August of that year. So it was an incredibly rapid development cycle for ARC, and the software came together pretty quickly as well. So speed was a big consideration for us.
Yeah, give us an idea of the thought process behind this, because as you suggested, there are certain pieces of technology that the ARC tool relies on that are scientifically proven methods, right? The UV lamp that actually kills off the pathogen. So you knew that if you brought this lamp here, what were like the technical requirements that you guys had to figure out? Like, okay, it's one thing to have UV lamps. That's easy. How do we, because I'm sure the thought process is how do we package it, how we turn it into a consumer product? Because this is, that's where all the IP, I guess, or in this case, is similar to, it reminds me like, because I'm a surfer, how neoprene was a material that didn't, the people that created a wetsuit, they didn't create neoprene. They're just like, hey, if you make the bodysuit out of this, you can keep people warm, right?
Yeah.
So it's already existing, but you guys also put some product modifications on it because you couldn't just roll out UV lamps. I guess that would be too much. Give me an idea of how the development of this.
Absolutely. Well, when we started thinking about the problem, we wanted to find a technology that was incredibly effective, very well proven. We didn't want to try to create something from whole cloth that we were going to have to convince people would work.
Right.
Looking at many of the alternatives out there and looking at the environments where sterilization is necessary, UV really came to the surface. It's used in operating theaters and intensive care units, and those are the most demanding applications, and it has to work and it has to be efficient. So that really, I think, set our sights on UVC. But beyond that, thinking about the situations we wanted to use it in really drove a lot of the design decisions. So we wanted it to be as powerful as possible and thus be able to disinfect as quickly as possible and handle large spaces. And so, we looked at the electrical requirements in commercial buildings and basically went right up to how much you can draw from an outlet without causing circuit breaker problems. So that was actually one of the big limiting factors was, how much power can we get to this thing, how quickly? And that ended up driving a bunch of the design. And so, it turns out that hair dryers are kind of great examples of high draw appliances. I'm sure we've all had our circuit breakers trip when someone's running too much hair
dryers and vacuums. Every time you turn one of those on, the lights go down in your house usually.
Exactly. So we draw just a touch less than a hair dryer and put out a tremendous amount of UVC, and we're one of the most powerful products on the market, even among the commercial grade ones out there. I think another big consideration for us was usability and ease of use. That drove a lot of the design decisions, and especially on the software side, figuring out how to take something that's typically used by infection control specialists, people with master's degrees and certifications, and make it more accessible to a broader set of people was a pretty critical piece of our design thinking on this. And then safety was a huge thing. A powerful UV light can definitely cause problems with exposure. So we put, I would say, more than half of the design time was figuring out how to make it safe and be able to detect when people got in range of it and turn it off before it could cause any harm. So that was a really big consideration as well.
Yeah, this is super cool, and like I always do in all of our shows. Aaron knows me. Aaron's our producer. He always says, like, I like to dumb it down for myself. That's just because that's how I understand things. So I equate it to like lights in the movies. In the movies, when vampires get hit with sunlight, like they instantly like vaporize. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is what this is. This UV light, the pathogens, the vampires. But we as people, we might not get. We also have to be. We also have to limit our exposure. We can't see it either. You got these towers. They look cool. You satisfy that one side, right? Consumer products have to kind of look cool for people to want to have them in their house because it is big enough where storage would be a problem. So people typically would think of this as like, would I be willing to have it exposed or like showing? So I think it looks cool. Talk a little about the safety component of it, because as you mentioned, you had to, this is one of those products where it's not good enough to just tell users like, hey, don't be in front of it when it turns on. Like the reality is like little babies are going to run through the room, or kids, or like there's so many things you can't control, right? You can't just say, hey, don't get hit by the light. How did you
Yeah.
guys go about the safety of this product?
Yeah, there are a couple of key aspects from a safety perspective. So one of them is the startup sequence and having a very clear countdown when you engage the machine, and we have a light ring at the top of the device that starts blinking yellow, basically as another visual cue that something's about to happen. So kind of having the startup sequence and lots of visual cues was one thing. We do train everyone when we deliver devices and kind of take them through the safety protocols and stuff like that. But the really key thing was building a very reliable PIR sensor-based sensor system that can detect any movement at a considerable distance from the device. And part of the design was making sure that we could detect people far enough away so that even if they do get a little bit of exposure, they're far enough away that it's harmless, essentially. So having enough distance, enough accuracy, and a fast enough response time was really key to making that safety system work. And we tested that, as you can imagine, extensively.
Okay, so who was the first test subject to make sure that this thing would turn off if a person got in range?
Our CEO Grant had the honor of being the first live tester. We'd of course already done quite a lot in the lab on the benchtop when we were doing the circuit design and mechanical engineering. So we were pretty sure we weren't going to expose him, but he had the honor. So
Gotcha, and it worked. I'm assuming just flawlessly.
Oh yeah, it works, yeah. By the time we were ready to start building later prototypes, we'd really tested that thoroughly and made some modifications along the way to improve distance and accuracy and all that kind of thing. So,
by the way, as you were telling the story, I was thinking to myself about there was an episode of, I forgot what the name of the show was called, but it was with Donnie Deutsch was the host, and they were talking to the CEO of Taser, and he talked about how their goal and their company mission and goal was to create non-lethal means of incapacitating humans and defending humans. And they said, well, how did you know it was non-lethal? It's like, well, we had to try it on somebody. It's like, who did you try it on? It's like, well, unfortunately, it was me. He was the first person to get hit by the taser. And they said that's actually how they actually used to demo it. They used to demo it by, they'd be in front of police, let's say the police force, and the person would be like, well, how do we know it's non-lethal? It's like, well, shoot me with it. And they would let him do it. And then apparently, inevitably, he joked that there would always be one officer that was like, I can take it. You got to think this is before tasers. Like, he's faking. I'll take one. And then once he got crippled to the ground, they were like, okay, this thing works. So this is an amazing technology. It's, as you mentioned before, it was scientifically known that this would work. I want to share some of the stats that you guys have on your website. I think it's pretty fascinating for our listeners. It's you mentioned on your website you claim a 2-to-1 ROI versus manual spray, but inside you guys have some amazing factoids. So it is estimated, for example, you guys have cited a study where less than 50% of the surfaces that if you manually clean something, that you will actually touch less than 50% of the surfaces. I'm gonna tell you right now, as a person who's dusted before, 100% true, because even if I tried my best, I couldn't get it all. And then a lot of times I won't try my best. So I'll leave some behind.
Yeah. Well, and another thing about manual cleaning, and it certainly has its place, but for doing large spaces regularly, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And especially with bleaches and
the chemicals and sprays. Yeah.
You've got a couple of interesting problems. One is if you read like Clorox wipes bottle really carefully, you have to leave the surface wet for quite a long period of time, like several minutes typically, for the bleach to have full inactivation of pathogens. And a lot of people just give it a quick wipe, and that'll help, but it won't get you to the disinfection levels that people are really looking for. So the amount of contact time is a big issue. Just physically getting enough solvent or chemical on the surface can be difficult. And then we're certainly hearing from some of our customers that just the amount of chemical exposure that people are getting is problematic. So,
the site cites, just for everyone's notice to know, the site cites some amazing things, right? So beyond the 50% of the surfaces, that's awesome. It talks about how the traditional methods of disinfection are actually quite unsustainable and whether it's gallons of chemicals, all the way down to the workers' comp claims that people have for being overexposed, inhaling, like issues related to respiratory problems.
mm-hmm.
It's just pretty fascinating stuff. Now, you mentioned when we first started this conversation that, hey, COVID-19 was what sparked this idea, like, hey, we need to get this to market fast. But you've also identified there's even more viruses and stuff that it can kill, like you name influenza, norovirus, HAIs, E. coli, staph. And you were saying these are traditionally and just so our audience, I want them to understand this. This methodology was already in play at hospitals. Is that accurate? They would shine UV light inside of an operating room to kill off everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So UV light has been around for a long time. It's been used successfully in hospitals and other medical settings. Back in the 40s and 50s, when tuberculosis was a big problem, it was used very successfully to stop the spread of airborne tuberculosis. There's just a tremendous amount of history and science and efficacy data on it, and so and it's useful for pretty much all microorganisms are inactivated by UVC. What it does is breaks the DNA and RNA chains and inactivates the virus or the mold or whatever keeps it from reproducing and spreading and from having any impact when we encounter it. So it's very effective, very fast, and it's great because, as you mentioned, it doesn't put extra chemicals or other contaminants into the space as well. So it's a very clean way of inactivating pathogens.
Now, what else happens to other living organisms? Let's say if they're in the room. So, like, let's just go simple, like houseplants, right? Does it have impact on houseplants or anything like that?
Yeah, there are varying levels of sensitivity, but UVC basically creates something like a sunburn. So if you leave a plant in direct sunlight for a long time, that's not sort of that doesn't naturally like high sun. It'll sort of brown and discolor.
Gotcha.
And that's the kind of thing that you would see with a lot of UV exposure for plants. So that's the reason that all of our products are very careful about human or animal exposure. We have the sensors, we do the training to make sure people don't put it in inappropriate circumstances, and we do a lot of engineering to limit exposure. So.
There you go. So I'd love to understand a little bit. So you've now, you developed, like you said, a lot of the technology that was developing wasn't the light, was how to protect people from the light, how to control the light. You mentioned some of the sensor technology, the IoT technology, and it looks like you can operate this with your cell phone, timers, sensors, all that stuff's awesome. And you tested it on the CEO to confirm it, and it was confirmed. It shut off when he entered the room. So perfect. Now these things work. How do you get a product like this to market? Because I feel like it's making medical claims, or was it considered a medical device? Like, how did it get to market to the point where you could actually, sell it to another person?
Yeah, so it's not considered a medical device, but we designed it to those standards, and basically have been very careful about the the mechanical and electrical design of the product. So, it meets standard electrical requirements, et cetera. Getting it to market quickly was really a process of elimination. And it's like, if you have a short period of time to get something done, it's really a question of what don't you do, and how do you sort of sequence things in a way that meets your objectives and gives you lots of flexibility. As an example, we started the hardware design first for obvious reasons. We need to build the physical product, and at the same time began the embedded systems work and the software work. And it actually took longer for a bunch of reasons to get the firmware and the software done than it did to actually build the physical product. And so one of the things we had decided early on was that we'd have full over-the-air updates available on the device. And one of the optimizations was we built the OTA update mechanism first, made sure it worked on the device, and then started shipping the physical hardware, and later went and brought the MVP of the software on board over cellular, and in some cases over Bluetooth as well. So that allowed us to parallel path to development efforts where, if we had tried to sequence them, it would have taken more than twice as long to get the product to market. So that was kind of a very intentional decision pretty early in the program. So
no, I would, now hearing you say that, it seems totally logical. I mean, very smart move. We looked at some of the research we did when we were having you, before we had you on as a guest. We knew you were coming on. We saw articles about how the company booked $5 million in 3 months, that it's quickly been tested, or I guess, and you might have an update to this, but like we found that the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, and Major League Soccer all chose R-Zero as a disinfectant solution. So there's a lot of companies very quickly making a bet on you, big bets. What's some of the feedback been? What are some of the, I'm curious how these organizations, how these operations are now giving you feedback, because I guess, how are they measuring this also? Because here's another crazy thing, right? I can't see a pathogen. So I actually have no clue if you're killing any, right? Yeah. All I know is, are my team sick, or is my team or my people not sick? And then even if they are sick, I don't know if it came from the fact that your machine didn't work or they got it from someone else. So this is one of those tough things to measure. Like, how do I know that your machine is doing what it's supposed to be doing? I'd love to hear some of the feedback you're getting from the consumer place.
Yeah, so we've gotten really positive, strong feedback from customers. One of the things that they love about the product is the fact that they can go to our dashboard and see exactly how it was used in the space, and that gives the facilities managers confidence that it's getting used as designed and doing its job. And with a bunch of our early customers, we went in and helped them set up the programs, gave them guidance on how to create processes, measure the results. We even went with little dosimeters that measure how much UV got got delivered to various points in big rooms, so they could figure out proper positioning and stuff like that. And all of that early work has allowed our customer success team to really quickly get people set up, show them how to use it, how to design processes, and then go back and just see every day that it's getting used as intended. And I think the peace of mind knowing that the key spaces have been disinfected and they can go and see a daily chart of how many cycles were run in which areas just gives both the facilities managers as well as the people who are using the space confidence that it's being used properly. It is a hard problem to determine where people get sick. We don't spend all our time at the office or,
right.
In a school or whatever. You have other spaces that you can be exposed. But I think with just such a solid scientific foundation and the visibility as to how it's being used, it just provides a lot of confidence. And We've heard really good feedback from customers that their employees and students feel really good about having it, and we have some anecdotal evidence that it has had an impact on how often people are getting sick in spaces. We're starting to look at doing some really solid scientific studies with full protocol to actually prove that out, and that's something we'll be looking at over the next several months. So
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because I'll just speak for myself. I'm a father. I got 3 kids. If anyone who's got kids out there knows, school's an absolute germ factory. At 100%, your kids are going to get sick just because they're around other people that are sick. The product R-Zero is so new. I know, like you said, there's not enough data or long-term studies done, but I think it's coming, like you suggested. It'll be fascinating if like schools that implement, let's say, this R-Zero system, and then other schools that don't, if you look at like the student body infection rates or things like that, like if you see a material difference, it'll be quite evident that this is a long-term big play. Right now, we as a society are very, very conscious of cleaning things. Maybe a little less thoroughly than when like last year when people were like wiping down everything crazy. People were drying their hands off because they were using so much hand sanitizer, right? Yeah. Now, people have kind of loosened their guard a little bit, but it's still there. People definitely care very much so about the disinfection. I mean, and I can actually see a place where the visual spotting of this will actually just increase consumer confidence. Like if I were to walk in a restaurant and see one on the side, I'd be like, oh, these guys disinfect every night like this. This is going to be great.
Yeah, that's it's something we think about a lot, and you'll be seeing some stuff from us in the next several months that'll kind of pick up on that cue a bit. Can't talk about it quite yet, but
yeah.
There's fun stuff coming. And when you take a step back, I think coronavirus has really highlighted the issue of transmission in public spaces. I mean, think back pre-coronavirus, we all went to the office, and pretty regularly there would be a wave of flu or norovirus that swept through the office, and it was just kind of part of life. You got sick when you went to school or spent time in the office, and we kind of accepted that. We don't think that has to be the way things are. I mean, if you think back to the world pre-antibiotics, if you got a minor cut or a fairly common disease like strep throat, it could have terrible consequences. Lots of people died from bacterial infections. And we just don't accept that in a post-antibiotic world. We feel the same way about having really good disinfection technology. Certainly it's important for coronavirus, which has been, a generational event, but it can have the same impact on flu and other stuff that we just take for granted that has a real impact on people's lives and productivity. So we look forward to a world where getting the flu is the exception, not an annual event, or colds, or just all of the, stuff that we accept as just part of normal sickness. Then we think that can significantly get reduced with the use of these kinds of technologies.
No, super fascinating stuff. The one thing that we wanted to also talk on this is because you have an interesting background. Your background, you were CTO of Blue Bottle. For those who don't know, and I'm sure most of the people who listen to the show are in tech, so they know what Blue Bottle is. High-end, premium, I don't know how best, that's how I describe it. High-end, premium coffee retailer, coffee store, coffee shops, also sold consumer packaged coffee at groceries. I wouldn't guess that a company like that would need a CTO, but I guess every company needs a CTO. I'm curious, how did you make the transition from coffee to like what I would say is, like you said, it's not a medical device, but it feels like one. But yeah, how did you make that transition?
Well, so I love solving problems and learning new stuff. And I think
it's a common theme among our guests, no question.
Yeah. And, I've been really fortunate to work in a bunch of different verticals where the problems are very different. And for me, a lot of the fun is just going and figuring it out, really learning kind of how the world works now and what you could do with technology, and then helping bring it to life. Coffee for me was a hobby run horribly amok. I've been a serious coffee lover since I was a teenager. It is the fuel of software engineering, and I embraced it fully early on. And then, when I was living in Chicago, I ended up going to barista school and learning how to make a really good espresso, and that kind of that experience was part of the light bulb that brought me towards Perfect Coffee and then Blue Bottle. But that was just a journey of learning and kind of totally immersing myself in a completely different space. And R-Zero is similar. Had some exposure to healthcare. I did a lot of and continue to do a lot of work with a wonderful company called Dr. Consulta down in Sao Paulo that does very high tech primary care. Got a lot of exposure to that world through them. And then when Ben and I met and started talking about R-Zero, just saw a massive opportunity that could make a real difference in people's lives. And it was a totally new domain to go really dig into, sink my teeth into, and figure out how to make something exciting with. So, that the learning and the process of discovery is really what excites me about all these kinds of things. So.
Yeah. This job in particular, well, I won't speak for you, but I'm just fascinated by it because it seems like something that should have been obvious. You know how there's certain things that once you see them in the market, you're like, oh, of course we should have had that for a long time, but for whatever reason there wasn't. And then when you see it, it's like it's clearly obvious. Like, oh, this should have been a product a while ago. And so I'm really excited how much benefit it can be. And I know for myself, my wife, she's a germaphobe. She's not going to be. She once she hears this episode, she can't wait to get her hands on one of these. When do you think it'll be like mass market available? It looks like right now the only way to order it is through like I have to talk to a sales rep, call you directly. Is it getting to the point where it's going to be like is it going to be like a Dyson vacuum? I can just go to my hardware store and get one?
Yeah, so we're working on a new generation of products that's going to be much more suitable for consumer use. So this really was designed with a sort of a B2B frame of reference. This is really for spaces where people gather and you've got a fair amount of traffic. It's, honestly, it's kind of overkill for a home.
I told you my wife's a germaphobe. I'm telling you, there's a lot of them out there. I think they'll buy them.
Well, and I'm sure we can figure that out, but it has largely been sort of business focused. But there's some really exciting things happening in the technology behind UVC that are allowing us to make smaller, kind of more suitable products for smaller offices and potentially homes and things like that. So one of the areas that we're really excited about is something called FAR UVC. It's a different wavelength of UVC that's actually safe for humans. And you can be in a room with a far UV light source and not have to worry about the same kind of safety effects that you see with ARC and with other products where the wavelength is much more reactive with skin and eye tissue and all of that. Far UV doesn't react at all, and so you get both surface and air disinfection while you're in the room. So that's something we're working actively on, and you'll see some cool stuff from us soon. So
no, that is beyond fascinating, Neil. I want to say thank you for joining us today on IT Visionaries. A big. Well, my personal graph. We definitely tilt more towards software, but I'm always fascinated by people making physical things that are going to improve the world around us. So this is amazing. I can completely see it. And this is a secondary question, and you might not know the answer, but I have to ask. So notoriously, bacteria is actually what makes your stuff stink. I notice these pro sports teams are using. Have they made mention that it smells less bad in the locker room? I'm just curious.
No, I haven't heard that. It wouldn't surprise me if it did have an impact on that. but now I'm going to have to go ask. So
There you go. Because I'm telling you right now, if you develop one so small, because my son's a hockey player, I've said it, if you develop one small enough where it just kills like the stink of my kids' stuff, I'm telling you, every hockey mom and dad in America will buy this for their kid, because this is a real. If you're a hockey parent, this is a real problem.
Oh, I totally know. So some of our best friends, they're all three of their kids were on the junior Sharks, and they are definitely a hockey family, and they both comment about the toxicity of the duffel bags when they come home from practice. It's legendary. So yeah, I can imagine that anything that'll solve that problem would be great. I helped do the setup at the 49ers, and I definitely need to go follow up with them and see if they've noticed a reduction in locker room aroma.
Yeah. Maybe that's a secondary use case for the Arc and the Arc Air. Those of you guys listening in, Arc Air is another product of R-Zero that makes it kills 99% of pathogens, and it looks like it's like an air filtration system. It's going to suck air in, clean it up, send it back out, and we take it that this is just the path R-Zero is going to continue to go down, which is, I guess, like touchless ways to disinfect and clean up the world around us. Is that like the main mission and goal? I don't know if you've even established that yet, given the youth of the company.
Yeah, disinfection is one of the key things we work on. The other thing that we're putting a lot of energy into is basically risk management. So there are kind of two pieces of the puzzle in one regard. So having good disinfection tools and the ability to go and clean spaces is really important, but as we kind of touched on earlier, you can't entirely eliminate risk, but the more you can understand it and make informed choices, the better we think people can do with managing the spread of disease. So another big piece of what we're building is sensor technology, so we can understand how many people have been in spaces for what period of time, and we're using that to think about doing real-time risk modeling, so we can say, hey, this is either like green, clean, it's been cleaned recently and hasn't had a lot of traffic, or it's yellow, it might need another cleaning or other countermeasures, and just really help provide more visibility into the risk status of spaces. So sensors are a big part of that, understanding both the movement of people in space and then other aspects of the space that can have a big impact on how transmission happens are another area we're putting a lot of energy into right now.
That is awesome. Neil, I want to say thank you again for joining us today on IT Visionaries. But before you go, it is time for the lightning round.
Okay.
The lightning round is brought to you by the Salesforce platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Neil, this is where we ask you questions outside of the realm of work, so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. You ready?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we checked out some bios on you, and it says that you're an adrenaline. We found that you're an adrenaline junkie, that you enjoy windsurfing, surfing, backcountry skiing, and photography of your outdoor adventures. Is this accurate?
Absolutely. I was on the water both days this weekend, surfing one day and paddleboarding another.
All right, so you're my best friend already, because I love surfing myself. All right, what kind of board do you surf?
So this weekend I was out on a 10.6 Jim Phillips nose rider.
Okay, can you ride the nose?
I have ridden the nose. I would not say I can regularly ride the nose. So
I'll tell you, I cannot ride the nose. Every time I walk up there, I sink it or I fall off.
Yeah, you got to be really firmly in the pocket, or you're going down, basically. So I don't know. I'm a terrible surfer, but I love it. So I just go out as much as I can. So
me too. Now, I've also said that those hobbies. So you have more than me, because you have backcountry skiing as well. These hobbies take you to some of the most breathtaking places in the world. Where have you been that you just, it's like it's burned in your memory. Like this is like one of the coolest spots on earth.
Oh man, Valdez, Alaska is one of the
Wow.
most
Okay.
spectacular places as a skier. It's giant, steep peaks, just crazy runs, beautiful scenery. It's a pretty remarkable place.
Wait a second, but there's no ski resort there, or is there?
No, there's no ski resort there. You've got two choices: legs or helicopters, and both are useful for different things. So.
Oh man, Valdez, Alaska. The last time I've heard that place has always got a negative connotation because of the the Valdez spill, which was occurred there. But
yeah,
when's the last time you went there?
So I was there in 2014 last, and headed back up actually in April of 2022. So super excited to go back. Know the guides and have a bunch of friends up there. I just for a bunch of good and not good reasons haven't made it in a little while. But another place I love is Bella Coola, British Columbia, which is north of Vancouver. It's another spectacular area with just great skiing.
So based on your your responses, I would say you like skiing more than surfing. Is that accurate?
Well, no, I'm not sure. So I've been windsurfing since I was 10, spend tons of time out on the water. I have board meetings booked on my calendar during the summertime. And so, basically anything that involves, wind, waves, snow, I'm in. So I like them all equally. I'm probably a better skier than I am a surfer by miles, but they're both they're a huge part of my life. So,
well, the way I describe it to people who do one or none of the activities is you think about total time on board, and so when your total time on skis or on a snowboard is so much greater than when you go surfing, your total time on board is very small, right? Yeah. You're like riding the board for seconds at a time, and that's why when you see professional skiing or professional snowboarding, their tricks are like 1080s, like huge airs, 20 feet in the air, where a pro surfer's trick is like doing a big turn.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about surfing is it's one of the most resource constrained sports ever. Like you've only got like a couple of feet of wave that's good to ride, and you got to get in there. And oh, by the way, there are usually 15 or 20 other people waiting to get in that little pocket as well too. So it's a social and resource constrained activity. So.
And for the fearful, because they ask me this all the time, people are scared of wild animals. When you're a surfer, people are scared of sharks. They always want to know, have I seen a shark? But I'll ask you, have you seen a wild predator while doing any of your favorite activities, whether it's surfing or skiing? Have you ever had a close encounter with a wild predator?
So I've seen a black bear while backcountry skiing. So I wasn't very close to it, but he was down by the river. We were up on a ridge, so we were in the same neighborhood basically. It's funny, when I first moved out to the Bay Area, I'd been windsurfing a ton that summer. I went to a party and told someone about my sailing, and they said, "Don't you worry about sharks?" And I was like, "Not really. Why?" And they're like, "Well, you realize one of the world's largest breeding grounds is exactly in the area you windsurf all the time." And I was like, oh, "Okay," but I've never seen a shark while either surfing or windsurfing. The most
me neither.
Yeah, I know.
Me neither.
I just think I'm sure they're out there, and I've seen dolphins and all sorts of other stuff, but never a shark. The most frightening wildlife encounter I've ever had was actually down in Santa Cruz. I was surfing at the Hook, and a sea otter decided it was going to jump up on my board and work on its lunch. And it, it was like, hey man, I'm here, you're leaving. And I was like, okay, you can have the board for a little while. It was not backing down. So
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been surfing for decades now. I've never seen or knowingly saw a shark in the wild, but I was once bumped, literally bumped by a dolphin.
okay.
I might have lost like 10 years of my life. Like I freaked out because like it's giant, it's gray. You don't know what it is, like
Yeah.
right off the get back, but like it bumped me and then it like breached the surface a couple feet later and blew air out of its blowhole and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But I was freaking out. I was like, oh my god, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
I've seen dolphins a couple of times. Actually, out in Hawaii, I was windsurfing, and there was a small pod, and they love hanging out with windsurfers because we're fast and maneuverable, and they just they were out in force one afternoon, and it was super cool sailing with them. They just kind of
Yeah.
follow along, and they looked like they were having as much fun as we were. So.
Absolutely. Well, Neil, I want to say you have continued our streak of CIOs and CTOs that love, I would say, the outdoors. We have the wild. We had skydivers on. We've had downhill mountain bikers on. So you continue the streak. We are not a bunch of people sitting at a computer all day long. Adventurers that just happen to also know how a computer works.
Yeah, you got to get outside. Some of the best problem solving happens when your brain's in neutral and you're focused on skiing or surfing or whatever. It's like shifting that mindset makes room for different stuff to happen. So.
Neil, thanks for joining us today on IT Visionaries. Couldn't agree with you more. Your story was awesome. And for those of you guys that aren't familiar, check it out. It sounds, I feel, I plug the websites whenever I see something really interesting for sure. It is R0.com, the letter R and then ZERO.com to check out their technology. Neil himself, check him out. He's got I'll say badass. He's got a badass background. You've worked for major companies as CIO, CTO levels for some of the biggest companies in the world. It is pretty cool that you are working on this project. I think it's going to, if it works out, it's going to benefit so many people.
Well, thanks. It's been super fun so far. And I think we've got a lot of good things to come in the future. So great.
Awesome.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. It's been great talking with you.